Hello and welcome to Lost in Chronologically Lost. I'm David,
I'm Matthew.
and we are at episode 2, 1864 to 1954, or maybe this should more accurately be called 1864 and 1954, as it
Yeah.
doesn't get anything in between there. But I just want
So,
to start this off by
yeah.
saying, Matthew, in the last podcast, when I told you the title of this episode, you said, well, the 1800s would be too early for any backstory. So
Well, as this episode went on, I kind of figured, okay, this guy, his he'll probably be another one of those characters that showed up throughout the story, and this is like where we see why he was there in the first place. And
right.
I wasn't sure if they would also have his age be extended, but I guess there was already a precedent for that. I do just have one question. Is
Mm-hmm.
this the same island Jurassic Park takes place on?
uh was Jurassic Park in the Pacific? I or then
I
again,
don't
well this uh
I don't think Jurassic Park was in the Pacific,
well you know what?
but weren't the people from the first episode, they were speaking Latin? How
You're
would
right.
how
Well,
would
yeah.
Romans
So
have
the
gotten?
first episode there was some people speaking Latin. We know Egyptians crashed there due to the
Yeah.
statue of Taweret, and now some people going from the Canary Islands in Spain to the New
Mhm.
World, they crashed there. So wonder how that works out.
I just think it's possible and would be interesting. I think there is potential there.
I will say there was at some point some fan theories that there were dinosaurs on the island. So
I mean, is that even a fan theory? There were dinosaurs in lots of places back during dinosaur times.
I no, but I meant like dinosaurs in modern times. Even.
Oh, well, that would be ridiculous.
No, of course. Smoke monsters though. Those are fair game.
Yeah.
So I just want to say first off about this episode, did you like it? Did you not like it more than the first one?
No,
Less?
I'd say I liked it about the same as the first one. I thought, if nothing
Uh,
else, unrelated to how it will connect to things in the future, it was just a solid, story of a character's struggle that just kind of worked on its own.
right. Again, just like the first one, this was late in the series, a backstory episode for a character mostly. So you get a basically a beginning, middle, and end
Yeah.
here, and then tacked on some more nonsense things I'm sure you didn't quite
Yeah.
understand, just like the first one.
So, so one thing I started to wonder was, so I think you told me that most of the content from the first episode of Chronologically Lost was like the third to last episode in the series.
Correct.
So was this, and you don't have to tell me if you don't think I should know, but was this before or after? Because,
This was shown before. I
see,
believe this was maybe in the middle of the final
yeah.
season.
Because what I started to wonder during the later parts was, am I supposed to watch this with the context of knowing what Jacob and the Man in Black's deals are, or is that still supposed to be a mystery to me? And I honestly wasn't sure.
Well, you would know a little bit because there are just it's hard to make sense of the timeline in the way that they show the audience.
Hmm.
So, Matthew, where would we begin with this episode?
I mean, we can begin at the beginning. We have, his whole
Right.
situation trying to save his wife.
Yeah.
And I mean, as soon as that started, I figured, okay, how is this guy gonna end up on the
Oh,
island?
of course. With all of these
Because
backstories, the first thing you think is,
yeah,
so what's going to lead them to getting on this island?
and I was wondering like, because I was like 80% sure he would end up on the island because I mean that's the easiest way to make it important. But I still have barely seen anything yet, so I don't know what rules this is playing by. For all I knew, he was the grandfather of somebody who ends up on the island that ends up mattering. For all I knew, he just he's influenced someone else. It was hard to say.
Yeah,
Yeah, he,
that
he
that would
did.
be
He did
interesting
end
to
up on the
see
island.
when you see it from my perspective. Obviously, I know who he is, and if you see it from the audience perspective originally, you've known this guy for years. But yeah, that's an interesting thing, saying maybe it's the parent or grandparent of someone who is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so
So
we
he
start with
struggles. He wants to save his wife. He goes to the doctor. The doctor's kind of an asshole, and he kills the doctor. And I that really seemed like it was like entirely by
oh, it
accident.
was completely
Like
accidental. He didn't mean to kill him. He just
yeah,
wanted the medicine for his wife, which
yeah,
sadly is too late. And so he ends up in jail,
yeah.
and we see that that Ricardo, or as he'll become to known in the English language of Richard,
I see.
um, he's learning English because he's
Mhm.
gotten an English Bible,
And the
and
priest there. I can't
it's pretty
agree.
terrible.
I can't agree with that system of values. Nope, too bad. You're going to hell for what you did. It's like, the priest, especially the way he's smiling at him. He's like my son, and he's just like, but it's too bad you're going to hell. The priest, he doesn't seem very sympathetic. Is the thing.
I
And
think he's getting a cut of the slavers buying,
mhm.
Ricardo. So I think he was maybe trying to push him towards, hey, definitely go with these guys because then I'll get a cut and you'll have some time
Yeah,
that you otherwise don't have. But yeah, because he says, you you can't atone because you don't have enough time, which is interesting. And so he gets bought as a slave.
oh yeah, and another thing I started to wonder here was, before I just saw he ends up on the island and his life gets extended, I was thinking maybe he interacts with the main cast while they're time traveled to the past. But the thing about that is that uh that can't be the case because we know this is happening after the time travel bit we saw in the first episode. And I recognize that this probably isn't that important, but I'm never going to get over how at the end of the first episode we saw them showing in the past and they're like, what is happening? And yet we also know that just isn't going to be resolved because we're seeing things that happened after that. Like if they left that time, we're not going to see how, or not directly, because there's no more space for it. This is chronological, and I'm still thinking about that. So I was wondering.
Well, we saw towards the end of this episode, we see that they had arrived in 1954, but clearly this is before the scene from before because Charlotte is alive and Locke
Hmm.
is with two good legs. Um, but so Ricardo, he is bought, and they say, you're
Hmm.
now the property of Magnus Hanso, which maybe that's an important name. Um,
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
I know it's such a subtle line, but it was. So then we cut to Jacob, who's just doing his usual weaving and fishing. He's gonna do a lot of weaving in the show. I'll say he spends a lot of time
Hmm.
doing that, and he's watching the ship, and
I think they said like he brought the ship there. He sold the Man in Black, and I mean, I think it's clear that he has control over like how accessible the island is, and he kind of like, in a metaphysical kind of sense, he just kind of opened the way for the ship to arrive there. That's the sense in which he brought the ship there. But I did wonder, cause I still didn't really know that much about the show. I wondered, is it possible he somehow like mailed them the coordinates and like manipulated them into wanting to come here in the first place? I
no,
don't think it was that, but
no,
that
it's
was
nothing
just
as
part.
literal as that. It's
Yeah, that was just, I had to think about the possibilities.
it's kind of like you said, just the sense that he opened it up for them to be able to come. And
Yeah.
the Man in Black says, is they
Oh yeah,
come, they
and
fight, they
the
destroy,
men.
corrupt, and it always ends the
Hmm.
same. But then
See, I like.
Jacob has a nice rebuttal to that where he says it only ends once. Everything before that is just progress, which it's
Yeah,
kind of a
I and
notion that I really
I.
like.
So first of all, yeah, I really like this dichotomy that's being set up between them of like, just because we already saw it in the last episode, but I like seeing it continue. The whole like, is humanity good or bad? Which obviously is going to lead to some subtext we can discuss later. But
Oh,
I
absolutely.
just
Honestly, it
I kind
recontextualizes the whole show
yeah.
when you see it like this.
Yeah, and I like just I mean I like it on a personal level of like this is their fundamental disagreement that they want to prove each other wrong, and I think it's going to be interesting in like looking through the main events of the show in terms of it being like a struggle between them. But also I have to mention the Man in Black is alive here. I didn't necessarily expect that because I thought his body was dead.
It's
And at first I wondered, was his body just not dead? But then as it went on, I think, okay, is it that he turned into the mist, but as the mist can manifest himself physically?
that is correct.
That's I
That's correct.
that's what I felt like I should be going with.
Yeah, so there are some kind of vague
Oh
rules
yeah,
as to
and
how he can look
yeah,
human, but sort of
I
what.
also wondered I also wondered just maybe this is just Jacob's imagination because he's not over the fact that his brother died, but nah, it didn't turn out to be that.
Yeah, I will say one concrete rule as to how he can appear as someone is if their dead body is on the island or was on the island at some point, and even if it's buried and decayed now, he can look like that person.
Huh.
Yeah, which leads to some kind of tricky things because you have someone who can look like dead people, and you also have actual ghosts. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things where it's like, was it ghosts or was it him looking like someone? And you often don't get a clear answer. And well, anyway, the Man in Black, he says to Jacob, he's like, "You know how badly I want to kill you," and he's like, "One day I'm gonna find my loophole." That
And he tried.
oh, he tried, and well, I think you can guess he's not gonna stop trying.
Yeah.
And
I wonder like when we get into the main plot of the show, like are we going to see some of our own real cast members also be in that position where he tries to manipulate them into killing Jacob as he did with Ricardo?
I guess we'll have to see. So then we see this very poorly made CGI ship in a CGI storm uh, crash on the island, and it crashes into the statue to explain why the statue isn't there later. And one thing to note, the ship is the Black Rock, which I don't know. I think it's just a cool name for a ship.
It's
And
not made of rock though, it's made of wood. Why would they call it that?
uh, just well, they were fans of the Black Rock subgenre of music, so uh,
More like black metal.
yeah. So they've
Anyway.
crashed, and the sort of captain or officer, I suppose, comes down and starts killing the slaves because he's like,
Yeah, see I was thinking cuz I as soon as he came down I was like, "All right, he's going to kill him or he's not." And I was thinking you could give a try to letting them go and just trying to keep in control. But like as he said, like he knew they're going to try and kill him, so I think he could have given it a try, but I mean, for his character, who is obviously a bad person, I can buy it that he would just think, nope, not worth keeping them alive.
I think it's really interesting that you specifically say he is a bad person.
He's keeping slaves here.
Well, no, no, no. Just that you say he's a bad person, and what happens, 30 seconds later is the smoke monster kills him. So
Oh, can the
I'm
smoke
not I'm
monster
not
only?
arguing his badness.
Okay.
Obviously, he's a
Oh,
slaver. He's trash.
okay, so are you trying to hint that the smoke monster can only kill bad people in some kind of connection to how he thinks all humans are bad? I don't know if you're saying that. I don't know if that's something you're giving away to me or not,
I
but
even I don't know if I'm saying that. It's just interesting.
okay. That's an interpretation.
Yes, he was someone who he was bad, and I mean he's a slaver. There's no real coming back from that level of
Yeah.
evilness.
Yeah, I mean, when he first showed up, I was wondering, like, is this a guy who is really desperately in need of someone who speaks English to the point that he'll take a prisoner? Or is it more that he just wants a slave, but he wants it to be someone who speaks English? And it became clear during that scene before that it was that.
Right. So then we have the smoke monster. It comes to Ricardo, and he is obviously fearing for his life at this point. Um, but it just kind of like looks at him and then leaves.
Yeah. So it could be because he's a good person, but who knows?
Right. Well, I mean, he's not wholly good. He did kill a man, even if it was by
Oh,
accident.
that was a for an accident, B intended for the purpose of saving somebody else. You know, my moral system says he's a okay.
Well, Richard still doesn't think he's a-okay. I mean, he wanted atonement.
He's a Catholic. No
That's
offense to
true. Those
Catholics.
1800s Catholics, those are pretty severe. So then he sees an image of his wife Isabella come, and
And
then
so she did not die on the island, and so I'm sure this is up to interpretation, but I decided I think this is purely a dream sequence. I think he is dreaming of her, and because he just saw the black smoke monster kill people, he has a nightmare about her dying to the black smoke monster too. And I think that when he talks up to the man in black about, his about when he talks to the man in black about, his wife, where she is, if he killed her, if Jacob has her, I think the man in black is probably just totally playing that by ear, going with whatever he can to manipulate him into trying to kill Jacob.
that's very interesting because I had the exact opposite interpretation, which is that when sort of the smoke monster black man in black looks at him, he's kind of like scanning his mind because not only with the whole Isabella thing and being able to look like her because he's sort of scanned his mind, he's able
Oh.
to manipulate him using his faith, saying that Jacob is the devil and that's how you're going to escape hell.
Hmm.
Whereas, I mean, we know this guy; he wouldn't believe in
That's
hell. He's from the island. He knows the island's
that's see
magic.
that's interesting because that would explain how he could appear as his wife. I don't know if I fully buy that, but on the other hand, that is also a really good point for why he would know to use religion. I mean, and maybe it's possible. I mean, lots of people show up on the island. Maybe there were past Christians, past Catholics who showed up, and maybe something let him guess that this guy was a Catholic. I mean, I don't know if he saw that he had the cross, but I don't know. I think that your interpretation that there's something to that as well.
Yes. So after a whole sequence of Richard trying to break out of his chains and failing, eventually the man in black comes and saves him. And, he says kind of an iconic line here. He says, it's good to see you out of those chains, which, I don't know, I just like that line. Um,
All right.
and then we just get some pure manipulation of, hey, you're in hell, but you know what? Here's a way out. You just have to go kill Jacob for sure. But make sure he doesn't talk to you. If he says anything, it's too late.
Yeah.
Which,
Which is I really liked. I mean, once he said that, I knew okay, Jacob's gonna talk. Is Ricardo gonna believe him or not? Because on the one hand, don't let the devil talk to you. He's manipulative. That's like a reasonable way to put it. That I could see that persuading someone. On the other hand, Jacob is persuasive and also more correct here. So I was wondering, which way it would go. Would he believe Jacob? Because obviously he would start talking to him.
well, he can only kind of starts talking to him because Jacob beats his ass when
Oh
he
yeah.
when he shows up.
And I wonder why is Jacob so good at beating people's asses? Like, where did he get the fighting experience? Why is he so strong?
I mean, he
Like
did get him by surprise.
he is competent at it. I mean, and it is a slave probably is not, you know, the most energetic or well fed at the moment, but it's this kind of this consistent thing where nobody can beat Jacob in a 1v1.
That's I never thought about that. That's very true.
Like, I mean, maybe it has something to do with his immortality. Maybe it doesn't. I'm not sure if all the. I mean, when he was a kid, it definitely didn't. But, I mean, he was just born that way, I guess.
Well, I should say because the Man in Black sends Richard to go kill Jacob, he's not immortal in the sense that he cannot be killed.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
only
Well,
unaging.
yeah, no, I got that. I got
Yeah.
that. So I was thinking at this point, what was the order of the story? Because on one hand, if this came after the episode where we saw Jacob's full backstory, then it would be a continuation, as it is to me here. Like, it is the next step in exploring their thematic conflict of, are humans good, are humans bad? But then if this came before, then it's kind of hinting at like what's the origin of their conflict.
Right, and well, like earlier in the episode where Man in Black says what humans do when they come, it's interesting that he's giving a repetition of what their sort of fake mother told them when he's the one who turned against her, but he's the one who's kind of adopted her philosophy the most.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I kind of wondered around the start of this well, not the start, but earlier in this episode. It's believable, but not necessarily expected for me that Jacob actually has faith in humans. Where, I mean, that doesn't need an explanation. Some people can just be like that. I'm kind of like that. I believe humans are good, but there also isn't an event that really gave him that. He just inherently believes it. Maybe it has to do with how he was the more trusting one as raised by his mother or his fake mother.
Okay, so after Jacob beats up Richard, he then starts drowning him to prove to Richard that he's alive and he's not in hell. So then he
Well, I
gets to
liked I
talk.
liked that scene
Oh,
because I
absolutely.
like that scene because like Jacob, he believes humans are good, but he is willing to be brutal. He is like you still think you're in hell, and he's like, and when he says no, I want to be alive, I want to live. I forget the exact line when Jacob was like, that's the I forget the line too, but it was like
He keeps drowning
that
him,
was the
and
that was
Richard
the
starts yelling, "Stop! Stop!" And he says, "Why should I stop?" And he says, "Because I want to live." And he says,
and
"Well,
it's
yeah,
like
there you go."
that's the it's something like that's the smartest thing you've said yet. That's the only reasonable thing you've said yet. And I was like, yeah, Jacob, he's not messing around here.
No, no, he is not. And so we kind of get this is the explanation of what the island is, and people kind of got mad at this explanation of you know the wine in the bottle is like all the evil in the world, and this
Oh,
island.
that was literal.
It's I
Okay,
mean it's metaphorical or literal.
but the wine is the source of immortality.
The wine is not the source of the immortality. I will tell you this.
Oh, that but then
Um,
okay, I don't know if I get it then.
Jacob can just kind of make people immortal if he wants to. The drink is kind of symbolic.
It's a ritual.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that wine. It
Then
could
well
be, he could make some more wine or whatever.
then I wonder like what what does it mean that the man in black broke it later? I don't know.
Well, I think that was some pretty obvious sort of symbolism because
He's letting the evil out in the
he's
world.
letting the evil out of the world,
I
and
mean, that's his desire, I think. But
right. So this
I
this
mean,
this
I
cork,
can't.
this wine cork bottle metaphor. That's the explanation as to what we're gonna get as to what this island is.
Yeah,
That's
see, that's. I can see that being disappointing to those who stuck with this show for season after season. Getting it at the start and having you just tell me now that's all we're getting, I can accept it. But it's definitely vague in a way where it makes me think I want more details of how that works, and I can accept not getting them, but I think if I had stuck with this show for years, I would not be accepting that so easily.
yeah. See, I completely accepted it because I was never one to really question what the island is. I'm like, it's an island and there's magic. It's fine. It's just, I mean, there's no real answer to what the island is because
Yeah,
I mean it
I
is
just
an island, you know.
well, I just more wanted like a I would just want a little more understanding of the mechanics of like how the wine works. What does it mean to how does the island store all the evil or like
Yeah, this makes me
what
think that if
is
you had watched it the normal way, you would not have liked this final
I
season.
the more I think about it, the more I think I wouldn't, which just makes it nice to experience it this way. Like I wonder, okay, it's symbolic that he broke the wine, that he wants to release the evil in the world. If that, I don't know if his goal is
Well,
that,
it's kind of
or
like
if it's just he's
the evil
willing to do that.
is like him because Jacob's keeping the
Oh,
man in black on the island. He can't leave,
but
and
so he is that just is he a representation of that evil, or did he become more evil after going through the what was the place called again?
the heart of the island.
The heart, yeah. Is him being the evil a post heart thing?
It's it.
I don't know if these
Well,
I don't know if these have answers. But yeah, I mean it's all fucky, and I'm not
I mean,
against.
I think we can kind of see the answers, which is that one sort of Jacob sees him as evil,
Mhm.
due to what he's done. He thinks humanity is trash. He he has killed people as the smoke monster, and he doesn't feel bad about it. And he's kind of like a master manipulator. And maybe there's more to it, that it's just general
Yeah.
evilness, and the island could leak it out if the island wasn't here or something.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And I mean, I guess and that's all fine. It's just fucking a way where the nature of the answers is fine. It could just be hammered down a little more clearly. Because I wonder, does breaking the wine actually do anything?
no, it's just symbolism.
And that's fine. But I mean, I had to ask. The fact that I had to ask and that you had to give me an answer that wasn't clear in the show. I mean, maybe it would be clear in the long term, but yeah.
Right. So then we kind of get this conversation between Richard and Jacob, where where Jacob says, "I brought all the men to the island," and he's like, "Well, then why didn't you help them?" And he says, "I wanted them to help themselves." Whereas, and
Yeah. And
Richard says,
okay,
"But if you don't
this
interfere, the Man in Black will. So how can
yeah,
you prove goodness if the
and
side of
then
evil is the only one acting?"
and then he tells Richard to be his agent, the one who does step in for him, and this is where it gets me. I'm like, okay, the big old Christianity metaphor. And let me go through this a bit because for starters, yeah, God wants to show people are good, but he's not going to interfere. But the devil, he believes people are bad and he will interfere. And I'll say this, I was not raised Christian, so I'm not super perceptive about all of these things. So my first thought was, oh, so Richard is his angel. And then a bit later, when he got his cross back, and then when I noticed that his beard bears a certain resemblance, then I was like, oh wait, is Richard Jesus? Would I have noticed that earlier if I knew more about Christianity? I don't know, but you know what? I'll give the show this. It was not too heavy-handed, and it was interesting enough in its own right that it wasn't just riding on being a metaphor for a major religion. It would be interesting even if you didn't realize the metaphor, and I think that's what matters.
Right. I will say, Lost, at least near more towards its end, it tried to be not non-religious, obviously, but it tried to be more incorporating of other faiths. But it's gonna be kind of Christian themed for about 97%.
Yeah.
So
It's just like
I can't wait for you
is
to meet this one character, just because they are. It's just hilarious what how obvious it is with them. Um,
yeah. I mean, I just once he started talking about like I believe people are good, but I won't interfere, but the devil will interfere. I'm just like, okay, wait a second. I see what this is doing now. And okay, let me ask: am I onto it where I say like Richard is gonna be Jesus-ish, and is that gonna be a thing we see more of during like the main plot of the show?
it's more like, again, I was also not raised Christian, so I don't know this precisely. It's more like Jacob is Jesus and Richard is one of his apostles.
Oh, I
That's
mean,
how I see it. You could see it your way just
yeah.
as easily.
Well, I mean, honestly, it was him getting the cross back from the Man in Black, and I was like, wait, am I supposed to be connecting the cross to him? And it was also just
See, I didn't even see it like that. I was like,
is
oh,
it?
he got his wife's cross back. Like, I
Yeah,
just thought of it completely literally.
and it was that, and just he's got the facial hair. I don't know if that's intentional or not. I don't know if he's gonna keep having that when we see more of him.
Nah, he won't. I'll tell you right this. He'll be clean
Oh,
shaven. Um,
huh.
so just for this episode, he's a Jesus metaphor, and then shaves it
Yeah.
off. But
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 see,
anyway,
but see,
it
I think Jesus, as far as I know, Jesus does interfere with humanity, which makes me think like, no, the one who doesn't interfere is God. Obviously, not getting into the whole God and Jesus are the same thing, but then like, I feel like what God sends down to interfere is either Jesus or like an angel.
I guess in this sense, I was thinking more of God as just sort of that island power that Jacob
Hmm.
I don't know. It's again, it's not completely direct, and I'm not familiar enough with religion to understand any of this.
Yeah.
So But anyway, so
I wasn't raised Christian, but I took a religion class in college once that I learned some things about it.
yeah, see, this is I only took Eastern religion, so I
See,
have no
I
knowledge.
wanted I wanted to take Eastern religion, so there's a scheduling conflict.
Right. So in exchange for becoming his agent, he says, "Oh, I can grant you like sort of one wish, kind of." And he says, "Well, I want my wife to be back." He says, "No, I can't do that." So we know Jacob can't bring people back from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Well, then I want you to absolve me of my sins, so I won't go to hell."
And
And
again,
Jacob says,
so Christian.
"Yeah, well, I mean, this is a again 1800s Catholic man who was told he was
Yeah.
going to hell." And Jacob says, "I can't do that either." And it's not like I want to say it's not saying that hell is real and Jacob can't interfere.
Yeah.
It's just
It's
like
that Jacob's like, what do you expect me to
it
do?
was kind of like being absolved of your sins is something you have to do for yourself.
Yeah.
And then he says, "Well, then I never want to die, so I won't go to hell." He says,
And
"Well, I
it
can do
did make
that."
me think. It did make me think like some of that old style Catholic desire to be a good person, how much is wanting to be good and how much is really fearing hell. I think Ricardo, he's a good man. I think it's both, but the fear of hell is definitely a part of it as much as wanting to be a good person is.
Right, absolutely. So he becomes immortal, and then he goes and meets with the Man in Black, and the Man in Black just looks at him and goes, "You let him talk to you, didn't you?"
Yeah.
And but he says something interesting. He gives him back the
You know,
necklace.
you know, I'm sure if he actually tried to not trust Jacob out of believing to him to be a manipulative devil, I'm sure that would have been very frustrating to watch. So I'm glad he just actually listened to Jacob.
Right. Well, Jacob makes sense in what
Yeah.
he's saying. He just had to beat him up first. Um, but the Man in Black says, if you ever change your mind, and I mean ever, the offer still stands. So
Yeah.
that's
Maybe he will.
And then he buries
And
his wife's necklace.
I think I forget. I think the Man in Black mentioned it, but like, if he's immortal, he'll never see his wife again, which is like, I think that's a really interesting concept. That's like interesting whether or not you look at it through the Christian metaphor, but like maybe the afterlife doesn't exist and he just will never see his wife again. Maybe, keeping himself immortal is keeping himself from the afterlife and seeing her, but on the other hand, if he would go to hell, would she also be there in hell? And he can't know that, but he's scared of it enough that he's keeping himself alive, but then that leads to not being able to see her. I think that's just an interesting, tragic situation to put him in.
Oh, absolutely! Every backstory in the show is just going to be filled with tragedy, and that's why I love it. So then we get another meeting between Jacob and the Man in Black, and the Man in Black says, "I'm going to kill you still." And then Jacob just says, "Well, if you kill me, someone else will just take my place." He says, "Well, then I'll just kill them too." Like he's just not going to stop. And he breaks the bottle because of symbolism. Now, flash forward to 1954.
Yeah.
So I
And
just want
so
to say, what did you think
I was
overall of
like,
Richard's story?
I thought it was good. Much like I think, honestly, compared to the first episode, I think that it wasn't as much of like an interesting standalone where like the first episode I think is something. I mean, if you watch the first episode, you would probably want to see more and see where things go, especially with the time travel stuff at the end. But Jacob's story is something that could work on its own as just a standalone piece of speculative, mysterious kind of sci-fi.
Right.
Ricardo is not as standalone and obviously connected to Jacob and the Men in Black, but I think Ricardo was an easier character for me to kind of root for.
Oh, absolutely. There was no real. You didn't have to see him from when he was a baby
Yeah.
and have all these things with his brother. It was more straightforward.
Yeah. It's just yeah, I want to see things work out for this guy. And in the end, it seems like they kind of are. I mean, he's stuck on the island and he doesn't see his wife ever again, but there is something nice to the fact that he gets to live
Yeah, and
forever-ish
he gets to try
and
and
he's
help
gonna
other
be and
people.
he's gonna be doing good. He's making a meaningful life for himself, and I think that's a nice ending after seeing everything he went through.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now we go to 1954, and it starts with this old couple arguing over making a fire.
Yeah.
So clearly, something has happened to them, and they don't have any fire. They don't have any supplies. This guy Frogurt is complaining a lot. Um, we
I
see
think what did they say his name was it later?
his real name is Neil, but
Neil?
we call him
Yeah,
Frogurt.
Neil. He was so annoying.
And that's why he gets shot with an arrow.
I I have to wonder like when in the show, how far in the show this was. You can tell me or you cannot tell me,
I can
but
say this
I
was
wondered
in
like,
season 5. I don't remember when.
because there were a lot of characters here. Some of them seemed very maybe it just wasn't focusing on them, but some of them seemed very much like they're just background characters, and some of them seemed very expendable that they were just dropping like flies.
I will say this scene, even the creators, they said, they were maybe in the middle of season 5, maybe early season 5, and they said the plot just doesn't have room for all these background characters anymore. So if you never see
See
anyone
that?
again, they died in
Yeah,
this arrow attack. That's what happened.
yeah. Honestly, I'd be like shocked that they went that far with so many background characters.
Yeah, so was I when I rewatched this. I was like, huh, they really stuck around.
Like I would, if you have people stuck on an island, I would think like you would really make it so everybody there is someone who matters.
They,
And I
I
mean,
will
if
say, at one point they really tried to do that, and everyone hated it. So they went, "Gotcha,
oh
not
yeah,
gonna do
like,
it."
well, I mean, you can only do that if you don't have too many, of course.
Right. So they. But before that, there's sort of a scene with Desmond and Charlotte. Sorry, did I say Desmond and Charlotte? I meant
No, that
Daniel
was
and Charlotte.
Daniel.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Whew, that's a mix-up. Anyway, with Daniel and
I was
Charlotte.
thinking like, wait, have I seen the Desmond yet?
No, I just mixed up the names of Daniel and
Yeah.
Desmond for some reason. So Daniel Faraday and Charlotte are, sitting, and it's kind of cute, even though we know she's gonna die, just from
Yeah.
last episode. And
Although it did seem like he wasn't quite. I completely lacked the character context here, but the read I got in the scene was kind of like she was kind of reaching out over an anxiety that he was kind of not really listening to or helping her with. Like I feel like she really needed help there in a way that he wasn't being awful, but he didn't quite get what she needed there.
yeah, I will say Daniel, he's a very intellectual man.
Yeah.
And she says she's getting headaches and everything, and
Yeah.
he's kind of just like,
I mean,
oh,
he did the old like, oh, everybody's stressed, it's fine, and he wasn't really like helping her feel better.
And he says, "Oh, if we're going to leave, then I need to calculate a new bearing. So I need to know where we are, and I need to know what time we are in." So
1954.
yeah, well, we know when 1954 did the episode
Although
title.
although like, why are there people with arrows? Well, yeah, I mean there were people with arrows. I mean, we'll get to that in a minute, but I still had to wonder here. Man, I guess, as you said, this is before they end up time traveling way in the past, but we're not going to see what happened right after they time traveled way in the past, and I need that to be resolved. That's like my big question. Like, obviously, this show is interesting. I'm going to keep watching because I want to see what
I
happens in
will say,
general,
at
but if
least
I
some of that scene from episode 1 will be resolved fairly soon. I'd say within
okay,
maybe 2 or 3
because
episodes, you'll get some
like
content or explanation.
basically my big driving question right now is what happened there, like, other than just generally wanting to see what the show does. The thing that's pushing me forward is wanting that answered.
Right. Some of it will be answered shortly. Some of it will take a while to answer. So then, but clearly, Daniel and they know they are time traveling because, like he says, I need to know what time
Yeah.
we're in.
And also, if we didn't have the episode 1 part, I would just think here like, okay, this is where they time travel back. It happens after other things in the show. But because we have the first episode thing, I'm trying to think about how these two connect, I have to think about how they relate. What's the like what leads to what, and it's making it maybe more convoluted in my head than it would need to be.
Right. Yeah. It's Yeah, there's no real way to explain this. um,
Yeah.
but anyway, we get to an arrow attack where Frogurt
Yeah.
dies. Rest in peace, the best character. Um,
Yeah. So I wonder, like, first of all, there's people with arrows. How long have they been on this island? Where are they from? Because they're, or maybe they're using arrows because they don't have access to. Maybe like maybe they're from a reasonably higher tech time period, but they just obviously didn't have access to that, so they had to start using arrows. I don't know, but well, they have the arrow attack. They run away,
uh,
and then they get attacked by some British soldiers, which is like they're like our island, and I'm like, okay, okay, British colonialism.
I will say, um, they they aren't British. They just that guy that
Or they
once
if they're American, I my first
they aren't
my
American either.
first
Um,
okay, my first thought was American. Then I'm like, that sounds like British accents. What are they, Australian?
it's
Is
no,
this New Zealander colonization?
no, it's that guy just has a British accent. Okay, that's just what it is. There's no explanation as to why he
Okay,
has it.
who's colonizing? Whose colonialism is this? I have to I have to stereotype someone here as strolling up to an island and claiming it's theirs. Who do I get to?
You think Jacob would let this island be colonized?
Oh, I don't think they'd be colonized. I think that these guys think they can colonize it. Frankly, from the way they're talking, I'm not sure they even realize that this is that they can't leave the island or that there's something mysterious going on. I mean, I guess this is 1954, so it could be when was that Korean War? I don't know, some
I
other
believe the Korean War
conflict.
would have just ended. I think the Korean War was 50 to
Well then,
53. I could
well
be wrong.
then, it also could just be some World War II holdouts like the Japanese guys who were on random islands staying there for decades. You know, some World War II, that's okay. This could be totally wrong, but this is like my fun guess.
Uh huh.
World War II holdouts who went on this island during like I don't know the Pacific campaign, and they're like, we need to make sure this is secured. It's our one of our secret bases. Like, and then and they just don't find out that the war ended because they don't get any messages. They're just thinking like we need to stay here, make sure that this base for our country stays safe. And then when strangers have showed up there, they're like, "Who the hell are you?" But then at the same time, there's also people shooting arrows on this island, and a lot of them. And the two groups would probably know each other, so I don't even know.
Oh well, I'll just the group that sort of the guy with the British accent belongs to is the group who shot the arrows.
Well, he has gun. He has a gun.
Yeah.
All right, you know, it's I like giving my fun guesses, but yeah, there's no real way for me to know the answers yet.
Right. Um. So and he one of them kind of says, he's demanding sort of the information. He says, "If you don't tell me, I'll cut off your other arm." And they go, "What?" He's like, "The first one's
What?
not negotiable." Just
Okay, okay. So he has a British accent. Like, is he just the only British one, or is he also not
I
British?
think there might be a couple, someone else with a British accent. They never explain why the people who have a British accent have them, other than they
Okay,
cast British actors.
basically this guy sucks.
Oh, absolutely. Um, and Locke knifes one of them straight in the back.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah, and
that's
another
him.
thing I have to wonder here about Locke showing up is I don't know if Locke was just there with the group on the
He
beach and
was.
then
He
they
was.
got separated. Cause okay, part of what cause I lack the information so far, I wondered what if it's like Locke time traveled to the past before them and they wondered where he was and then they all time traveled to follow him
No,
and
they
then
all
it's like
travel
oh
together.
Locke is here too. Okay, but okay, that's see that's good to know. I just wasn't sure like how much of a reveal Locke being there was supposed to be.
Right. It's honestly more of a reveal for the characters than it is for
Yeah.
because as you might not remember from the last episode, when Locke was down in that cave, the sort of man in the cave said, it said you had to turn this wheel, not Ben. And so now he had to turn it back in episode 1. So
Hmm.
it's kind of a thing like, oh yeah, Locke is still here, but you know, it's hard for me to get into more than that.
Yeah.
I will
I
say,
think
yeah,
that's something where I just have such a lack of context that there's practically not even anything to say about it. Whereas there's some things where I lack the context and it's interesting to wonder, but this is something where just like let's just wait and see because it's less about what I should know and more just about the general situation of what characters are where that
right.
is
Which
gonna
is
be a
which
little weird.
are things I will fill you in on simply because it's unfair to try and guess those things when you're not
Yeah.
then they're when they're not supposed to
And
be
it's not
mysteries.
yeah, and it's like sure it's technically a spoiler for how I'm experiencing it, but it doesn't really matter.
Right. So this is where the episode ends, and I will say the next episode is 1954 to 1972, and I will say it picks up
Hmm.
immediately after this episode right off.
Yeah. Oh, that seemed like how it would go.
Right.
In fact, was what we just saw the end of an episode, or was it like I kind of felt like it was up to the first commercial break.
It was about the first commercial break. Uh,
Yeah, that makes sense.
so I have now that you know that it's going to pick up right off, and but it's going to go to
So, but
1972.
for
What
but
would
so
you like to
not for a
see?
full episode then. By the so we're not going to spend that much time in the past here, I guess. Which is good. I mean, that's fine because what I want out of like what I want out of this and what I wanted out of the ending of episode 1 was just at least seeing where things go immediately during whatever time travel arc this is. So next I'll get what I talked about last episode of wanting like the whole time travel arc of oh, we're stuck here, how are we going to get back, which I think is just an enjoyable plot even if I don't know the characters.
Right, absolutely, and you'll get some of that next episode. I will tell you that's.
So 1972,
Hmm.
I'm gonna guess that won't be more time travel. That will actually be a main character or like an important character's backstory. Somebody who we can see what their life was before they ended up on the island.
I honestly I don't really remember. I think we're gonna get some things from multiple episodes though, more than just two.
Hmm.
I think again I
Yeah, I
don't know the
mean, a
exact.
lot, or maybe it's someone's backstory was in 1970 and someone's was in 1972. Maybe there's a backstory in 67 and then time travel in 1970 and then a backstory in 72. I don't know, but I
Right.
guess those are the general things I'm expecting
Yeah,
here.
well, it's not unreasonable for those time periods, especially because of so the show started in 2004, and so all the characters in there, if they're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, even, you can go
Yeah, some
back
of them are
for their
old.
backstories. Yeah, like you saw, there was that
Old
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 couple on the beach,
yeah.
Locke. He's not
Old
a
people
young
need
chicken.
yeah.
Um,
Old people need backstories too.
exactly. So you're looking forward to some time travel stuff for the next episode. I'm excited
Yep.
to see your reactions to the next episode and any thoughts you might have because there are some things I know are very interesting. I think that is it for episode 2, unless you had anything else to say.
Uh I don't think so. I think it was a good episode. I'm excited to see more.
Well, that's also for Lost and Chronologically Lost. I'm David,
I'm Matthew.
and I hope you join us next time for episode 3, 1954 to 1972.